within the country, we have divided, I mean, we have had so many discussion and also some different papers that have been written by different authors. But today I want us to discuss it as a collective here, especially when it touches on the issues of digital economy in the country and as well as in Africa. So I have a number of lineup speakers, I mean, panelists here. I'll call them one by one, and then they will introduce themselves. They'll tell us who they are and where they're coming from and what do they do and who are they representing. So I have I have Rorisang Posholi. If you could please introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your bio. Rorisang.
Hi, Peter. How are you?
Thanks, and please go ahead.
Great. Hi, Peter. Yes, so my name is Rorisang Posholi. I am the co-founder of I Founded Proprietary Limited, which trades as Brandbook. At Brandbook, we are a market research organization that aggregates consumer purchasing data across all retail channels. We then collect and process that data and distribute it as a product and solution back to brands and retail clients in order to give them a better understanding of their clients and consumers.
Hi, Rorisang, thank you. If you may please switch on your video for us to also identify you.
Right, sorry.
If you may please.
Yes, I don't know if you can see me now.
Yes, louder, we can see you clearly.
Yes,
thank
perfect.
You. All right, the next will be, it will be, just want to confirm here, it will be a representative coming from Brand SA. I think we have Mr. Petros.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Petros de Kok, General Manager Research at Brand South Africa. We got the invite slightly late, but we will make a contribution in as far as it's possible. So thanks for the invite.
Thank you, Doc. Much appreciated. And the next one will be Tibu Kholwate, will be representing Czech Khalifa. Please pardon me if I'm pronouncing it correctly. You will correct me. Tibucho, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Peter, and good afternoon, colleagues. I am the founder and managing director of Lefa Cooperative, which is a social enterprise that is really focused on mobilizing digital adoption amongst our communities with a strong focus on education. However, for purposes of this panel, I'm more representing the e-commerce advisory committee that advises the Minister of Finance on matters related to the digital economy with a focus on the financial services industry. I'm also a board member of E-Commerce Forum South Africa, which is an industry body that represents e-commerce operators in South Africa with strong links to the rest of the continent. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Tibucho. As I said earlier, to say that the digital economy and the issues of opportunities, actually, it touches on a number of things. I'm aware that the African Union, if not last year, they developed the digital economy strategy for 2020 to 2030. Yes, 2020 to 2030, wherein they touched on a number of issues. Digital financial infrastructure was one of them, and digital skilling, as well as digital services. So that on its own, it tells us that through the digital space, we are enabled to do quite a number of stuff. So I will want to, Rorisang, in terms of, from your side, how effective do you see the digital economy and its opportunities? And if so, if not, what are the challenges and what could be the best way to address such? Rorisang, I'm not sure if you get it.
Could be on mute.
Rory-san, you are on mute. Please unmute. Thank you. Please continue. Colleagues, we don't seem to hear Rory-san. Maybe Rory-san.
You know what sometimes happens with Zoom is when you join in, it asks you whether you want to use computer audio. I think sometimes I've missed that step sometimes, you know, then maybe he just needs to click out and back in again and then select that option. It's happened to me once. I'm not saying that is the problem, but sometimes things like that can happen.
No, true, Doc. Rory-san, can you hear us? All right. I'll suggest Rory-san, please log out and log in again. I'll be addressing the other two speakers. Please, if you can hear me, just log out and log in again. I'll ask the technical colleagues to see how best they can help you in regard. Right. Okay. Yes, colleagues. I think I forgot to introduce the PAICTA representatives actually on this subject. If you could please switch on your video and then introduce yourself. Dr. Attlee.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, sir.
Perfect. Attlee Gamundani is my name. I am a senior lecturer in the cybersecurity department at Namibia University of Science and Technology. And I'm also a postdoctoral fellow at United Nations University Institute in Macau. As part of this panel, I'm representing PAICTA as I serve on the advisory body for IARA for PAICTA. Pretty much, I'm more focused on research in IoT, AI, and cybersecurity. I think that will be all from me for now. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Doc. Colleagues, if I can request those who are not on panel to switch off their mics and if possible to also switch off their video for the sake of this session to continue properly with no interruptions. Ms. Greta, if you could please mute your mic and your video. Thank you. Rory-san, am I audible for you now?
Yes, Peter, you're audible. Am I audible on your side?
Correct. There we go. Fine. Now all is well now. No, I was saying I understand you're representing I found IT or I found it?
I found it.
Is that money, Rory-san? You find it?
No. The company actually, the trading name is actually Brandbook. So you can call it Brandbook and find us on our website at Brandbook.
All right. No, thank you. I was saying to you, as I start with you, Rory-san, to say that in this digital economy space, what are the challenges that you guys have experienced that are encountering in the process of digitizing the processes? And if so, how do you think that could be overcome? And or how best can we move forward in that relation?
Oh, thanks, Peter. Yeah, so I think the digital economy and its digitization is really one that will continue to grow at probably even a stronger rate in the years and decades to come. But I think the key challenges that we have at least seen or we foresee in the coming years in the future is the penetration of digital solutions in the lower end of the market. With a solution like ours, we typically try to collect purchasing data from consumers across all areas in the South African market. And we typically find it a lot more difficult to get this sort of information from the lower end of the market. You find that in lower ends of the market, digital solutions such as smartphones and integrated point of sale systems have not really reached the vital components of the economy, which play a very big factor. So I think to really start to address those problems, it is very, very important that we as the drivers of solutions in this market are really developing solutions and digital infrastructure programs that can cater for the existing infrastructure that's already there in the less developed parts of the economy. So we need to have solutions that are designed to already integrate into what's already available in the current economy, as opposed to bringing a different set of solutions. Because when we look at technologies such as 5G and all the other IoT related technologies, to have them really work at the optimal efficiency in the lower end of the market is always going to be a continuous challenge, so long as the basic infrastructure in that part of the economy is not fully catered for.
Thanks, Rorisang. Dr. Attlee, you cannot talk about the digital economy without the digital infrastructure. Are we there yet? Do we have such?
That's a very important question to ask in terms of whether we have the right digital infrastructure, or are we really ready for us to say we are ready for the digital economy. Let me start off from the digital infrastructure. If you look at what's enabling the digital economy in terms of these emerging technologies, the likes of 5G, the likes of AI, IoT, and you name them, you are looking at technologies that are not respecting the traditional forms of infrastructures in a sense. So we might not really glue ourselves to the lack thereof of maybe the appropriate infrastructures, because I think we might actually take it from an advantage point to say we might not be worried about legal systems, but we can start from wherever it is that we are and move on from there, which could be one of the advantages that we might be having as compared maybe even to other continents, let's say Europe and others that have to start thinking and deciding sometimes on much of the legal systems they have. So in terms of infrastructure, we might not be there yet precisely. That's to be honest, if we do a serious assessment of most of the developing countries, especially when we are focusing on Africa in particular. But then if you look at the potential that we have in terms of what we already have and what we could already improve on in terms of if we have a proper strategy of doing that, we might find ourselves in that position where we could really implement something practically on the ground. But one of the biggest challenges that I have when I look at the infrastructure, we actually have a bit of a digital divide, which we can't ignore thereof. And we have that challenge of the last mile, where you see the urban areas could be well off, and we might fall into the trap of saying we may be halfway through or a quarter through in terms of infrastructure. But if you look at the deep rural areas where PAICTA is mostly concerned, especially when they're looking at small to medium enterprises, we actually have a serious outcry there because we don't have the right infrastructure, and in most cases it's non-existent. And we really have a long way to go in terms of that. So if my focus is mostly on the rural areas and looking at those areas that are emerging, we still are yet to look at really establishing our foot in terms of the infrastructure. I would say we still have a long way to go.
All right. Thank you, Doc. Dr. Petros, how is South Africa benefiting in terms of the digital economy from this perspective of Brand SA? Do you see an increase in job opportunities or any increase in any area within the country?
You know, actually coincidentally, in the last few months we did, or actually late last year, we did a very big exercise. You know, we monitor a number of indicators of the country, particularly pertaining to competitiveness, our readiness for all those of things. And in that exercise, South Africa actually comes out looking very good in a number of digital related indicators, you know, technological readiness, etc. Now, the reason I say that, you know, is that I would like to caution sometimes, you know, these kind of discussions on fourth industrial revolution or digital economy or whatever runs the risk of being too big and too broad. honestly, we did work for the World Economic Forum when we hosted, I think it was in 2018, on 4IR and a number of dynamics. And I'm just going to give you a few examples. If we talk digital economy in South Africa, yes, we're talking things like online platforms for trading, enabling people and businesses to connect, to move products, etc., etc. Brilliant. We need to talk about that. However, then we forget to talk about things like additive manufacturing or 3D printing, where South Africa is actually one of the world leaders currently in that technology. You're looking at other domains of activity in South Africa, just in defense technology. Our defense industry in South Africa, yes, it's been challenged for all kinds of reasons over the years, but you know what? Bottom line, if you still look at some of the technologies that emerge from our defense, our satellite systems, our SCAR, square kilometer array, our science and technology domain in South Africa, I think we are very well prepared in certain aspects. However, so that's what I want to say. If we want to talk about job creation, etc., then we need a very new kind of thinking, not just about the technology, but how does it solve for problems in our society? For an example, basic electronic digital government services. People have been shouting and screaming about this for years. Colleagues, we need to face the fact, why cannot we access online driver's license platforms? Why cannot we renew a basic driver's license card on an online platform? For example, basic things like that. Now that is already potentially job creation for a local greenfields company of IT programmers, guys and girls in their 20s coming together. Let's solve government service delivery problems. You understand what I mean? Maybe that's the kind of thinking we need if we are real about creating jobs through the digital economy. Maybe just a last comment. If we talk opportunities, if we talk the future, there's a very practical thing on the table this year, which is the Continental Free Trade Area. There's a final phase now of negotiations of rules of origin, etc., etc. So that is coming into play within this calendar year. Now, one of the first major objectives of the free trade area is to establish one-stop border posts for the movement of goods and people between all the members of the free trade area. Now, do you know what that means? That means like what we are doing on the Musina border with Zimbabwe, we're establishing that infrastructure for a single border post. But now we must forget, it's not just a physical piece of infrastructure. We need massive digital infrastructure to be the backbone of the movement of people and goods in the region. So if we really want to innovate as innovators, as people active in a digital economy, those are the places where we need to be active and we need to be thinking, because that's where we need to solve for problems for the future, not just of us, but I think also of the region. So I just thought I'll throw in some of those thoughts initially. It's not being negative. I think we need to be engaging and challenging on these things, because there's great opportunities for us that I think sometimes we stand to lose because, it's somebody else's problem. It isn't. It's our problems to solve. So anyway, just a few thoughts from my end.
Thanks. We appreciate that. Yes, of course. Sometimes when we talk, we can talk of challenges and forget to talk about the good things that we have done and the good things that are happening at the moment. You touched on the issues of the licensing process, where you have to do it electronically. We have seen it in Home Affairs, where many things are done electronically, and most of the departments actually, I think the education department as well is also adopting such approach. So yes, there is progress. Tibuko, I know you're good. I know you like the discussions of the AI as well as the 5G. What would you say are the serious effects on the digital economy in terms of the artificial intelligence and 5G?
Well, I think I'm actually going to sort of agree with Dr. Pietrus. We start talking about those advanced concepts. Already South Africa, we are battling because we are lagging behind on 4G before we even talk about 5G. The vast majority of our land is covered by 2G, 3G connectivity, and we're only now trying to get, our fiber in place and getting 4G LTE in place before we get to 5G. So we know that the issue of the digital economy, it really revolves around the need for speed, right? So you processing large amounts of data in real time. So you need that hyperscale computing infrastructure that's able to deal with that data deluge and deal with it at speed. and at scale as well, as what Dr. Pietros was saying. So definitely we know that 5G is the underlying bedrock to provide that ability to deal with data and transmit data at those types of speeds. Secondly, when you're then dealing with that amount of data at that scale, is that the traditional ways of us analyzing, processing, storing data obviously is not going to be the right paradigm into the future. So we need an artificial intelligence in terms of algorithms that are able to provide those decision factors. So if you look at, for example, some of the examples that came out of the report by the Presidential Commission for IR, dealing with specifically what are the South African opportunities where implementation of AI can drive value in terms of helping us to get to what we are talking about, the digital infrastructure, enablement of the digital economy. To say we've got currently, for example, issues on electricity and power. You can't go digital if you don't have electricity supply that is consistent and reliable, right? So how do we then find innovative ways to reduce our power consumption, and the deployment of AI models into that space can help us find more clever ways on how to conserve power. So the other thing that was actually drawn out of the report is that, the digital economy, and I keep on saying this every time we talk about these things, is that, for example, there was a whole obsession with E. Everything was e-government, e-health, e-commerce, e-education, right? So we put E in front of a known concept, and now we think it's a completely different concept. The economy is the economy. We need to move the stuff that we've been moving and find out opportunities to manufacture new stuff, as what Dr. Pietros was saying. The digital part of it, I think, enables us to do it in different ways that make us possibly more competitive than other counterparts. So we need to know where we are strong and leverage these technologies to make us stronger in those areas, rather than, as you were saying, that we take this highfalutin view that, it's a whole new future. No, the economy is the economy. Where are we strong, and where can we then, entrench on the strengths that we've already built? Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Dibuho. Colleagues, if I were to do it my way, I was going to change the titles of all my panelists to call them doctors. But for the sake of this discussion, please allow me to call you by Mr. Dibuho and Rory-san. Rory-san, tell me, do we have digital skills to be able to transact in this space?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
Do we have, as a country, or maybe I should go over and say as a continent, do we have those digital skills that will enable us to transact within the digital economy space?
Absolutely. I think in terms of specifically isolating skills, I think we possess more than the adequate skills to allow us to be able to transact in the digital economy once we face it and it becomes a more permanent reality for us. I think, as was the large topic that was mentioned by Dr. Attlee and Dr. Pietros, the infrastructure is what remains a challenge to allow those skills to really be utilized and really be felt. So one of the questions right now from the rest of the panelists is, also from the rest of the participants, is, with the growth of the tech hubs that are currently taking place, is maybe not the challenge within the administration of actually deploying the technology into the economy. And I think just the evidence of seeing such a large number of tech hubs and a large number of technology startups across the continent growing and booming to take on a lot of digital and technological problems on the economy is an indication that, from the skills perspective, we are more than ready and more than equipped to grow the digital transformation.
All right. No, thanks, Rory-san. Dr. Attlee, I know Africa as a continent was behind in terms of the digital opportunities and digital skilling. What can you say in terms of the progress that has been made to date in terms of the continent to be able to transact within the space?
So if we are to do a flashback in terms of the transition that has occurred in, for the skills that are needed for the digital economy for African countries. I think the progress is really commendable, especially when you look at the various policies that some governments are really trying to put in place to create that enabling environment, especially. But you know the biggest challenge that we have when it comes to that front of policies, regulations, and all that, they are trailing behind because technology is actually way many years ahead in terms of what's happening. But in terms of whatever has been happening across the continent, I try to analyze especially the curriculum that we find in our universities, our colleges, our technicons, and even this drive, especially if you look at South Africa, the tech hubs, there is a lot of effort that's happening. And I'm also impressed with what also MICT CETA is doing in South Africa in terms of trying to revamp the curriculum and bringing those courses that are really aligned with the digital economy, especially when you look at AI related in terms of all the other emerging technology inclined topics, especially that speaks to what the digital economy needs in terms of the skills, and also putting on the forefront cybersecurity. Because if you look at the whole digital economy ecosystem, it's data driven. And once we appreciate that we actually have skills that needs to address the whole aspects, even from data ownership and all that, what it entails to be in an ecosystem that is sustainable and secure, that's quite important. So I would say in terms of the progress that has been made towards really skilling ourselves as Africa for the digital economy, we are on the right path. But I want to point out some of the highlights in terms of really being careful in terms of the path that we might be trailing on, especially when we try to benchmark maybe with other continents. We are sometimes blinding ourselves to try and look at what are the real problems on the ground that we need to be skilling towards, so that at least whatever it is that we are also building in terms of our skill capacity is going to be beneficial and helpful to the problems that we have on the ground. Because one of the biggest challenges that we might be having, we might be racing and competing to be on the international benchmark. But when you look at the situation on the ground, like we say, if there's shortage of food, there's shortage of water, that is maybe relevant to us. How do we really skill for us to tap into the potential that we have from those emerging technologies and leverage on that to be in a position to solve the problems that are really peculiar to us? So I would say we might be very comfortable to say we are on the right path in terms of scaling, but to what effect and at what level can we measure the impact of those skills on the ground? Because it's one thing to have the theoretical skills and the other thing to have those skills applied practically on the ground to solve the problems that are real. So there is that dilemma that we also need to balance in terms of that.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, Doc. Dr. Petras, I understand you are a researcher from Brand SA side. The digitalization, automation, artificial intelligence, issues of blockchain or Internet of Things, 3D printing, and so on and so on. Are they a threat to the old way of doing business? If so, how do we then absorb those who were not trained to be on this space?
You know, let's do this. Let's go back into the 20th century and let's look at car manufacturing. Just look at car manufacturing. The heyday of car manufacturing, 1950s, 60s, 70s, that was also the heyday of labor, human labor as a component of production. Look at car manufacturing today. Look at the Tesla plant. Go to a Toyota, even in South Africa, go to Mercedes-Benz, BMW, highly sophisticated. Yes, they do employ highly skilled people, and we're very thankful for that as a country because we're a major hub for that. However, the scale of human involvement in the actual site of production is, you can't compare it. It's ridiculous to compare it to even just a few decades ago. So yes, there is a real danger of the real economy as we know today being transformed to such an extent by introduction of new technologies that yes, you do stand to lose jobs, permanently so. We can't have illusions about that. Even in so-called most advanced economies, you can see how not just physical labor, but whole categories of management are being displaced by certain technologies. Now, this is not just a doomsday scenario. Yes, we must acknowledge that that is real, that threat is real. But that's what I said earlier on. This is now where we need to look, and I love what Dr. Attlee shared with us a moment ago, because I think what he said is part of my answer, that then we need to understand very carefully what is our social environments first. And I'm going to make an extreme statement. I'm going to say we are too easily slaves to technology. We are not slaves to technology. Humans are the agents that create that technology. We can't sit and wait for technology to solve the problems for us. We are the creators of the technology to solve human problems. And I think that's the African way. Now, I'm going to use a random, very different example from African music. A number of years ago, I did a fascinating interview with a man in South Africa who's like a walking encyclopedia of knowledge of South African and African music. And he made the most fascinating comment about the history of African music from the most ancient of times. He says when you go looking into African traditional forms of music, you will hear echoes from the world in it. You will hear echoes from China, you will hear echoes from India, you will hear echoes from everywhere, because the African cultural domain, the African cultural construct has always been open to the outside, to the neighboring kingdom, to the adjacent civilization. So African civilization has always been wonderful at absorbing new things, whether it's language, art, music, whatever. Here's the point I'm making. The same thing applies to technology in the 21st century in Africa. I think that absorption is part of our competitive advantage, but where the biggest danger for us in Africa is that we do not then take those things, make it our own, and solve for our own problems, because we think we need to emulate what's happening in Brazil or Argentina or Australia. Let's solve for our reality. And if that means that some of these technologies we say no to, then we say no to them. Honestly, it's our reality. We need to shape our reality in scientific and technological, but also in discursive terms. And discursive terms meaning the language that we use to create our future. I think that's very important in the debate on science and technology, because if you look into the intellectual discourses around African knowledge systems, about the abuse of Africa and its knowledge and its civilization in history, we need to claim our space, number one. And number two, when it comes to solving for technological issues, the future is ours because Africans are inherently creative. But I do think we just need to watch out that we don't become slaves to other people's technology that they airdrop into our space and then we just say happy, thank you very much. I think those days are over. It has to be over. Otherwise, we will not survive this century.
Thanks, Dr. Petrus. Dibuho, the emerging technologies, are we really seeing the impact, how good they are doing in terms of the GDP? Are they really improving our people's lives? If so, how?
Yeah, good question. I don't have any, anecdotal evidence to that effect. What I do know, as an example, Peter, is that I was involved in the formation of the National ICT Forum under the previous DTPS, where we put together the National ICT white paper. It's a policy white paper that came out of various recommendations on how do we actually take these ICTs and these technologies to drive exactly what you're saying, a real impact and a change in the way we live, play, and work. And I think one of the areas that we struggle with as a country is we come up with the best policies, but our implementation strategies leave a lot to be desired. All right. So if you look at, for example, coming out of the National ICT Policy White Paper at the time, I was heading up the working group on e-commerce at the time, and which is obviously at the heart of the digital economy in a number of ways. But what came out of the policy white paper was
colleagues, I think we lost Dibuho for a second there. Dibuho, I think we lost him. Yeah, no, we lost him. All right, but let's continue. Colleagues, those who are in attendance, please, if you have a question, please feel free to send it to us on the Q&A, or you can even use the chat options to do that. Tebogo, apologies, we lost you for a second there. You may continue.
Yeah, when technology fails, it fails, right? So my
I
network just...
I hope you're not on 2G there.
Well, I thought I'm on 4G, but clearly, you know, when it rains, that's not the best connection to be on, it seems. So what I was saying is that in the policy white paper, it was suggested that if we implement some of the recommendations around implementing e-government services, that's what Dr. Pietros was saying, you know, if we start implementing the delivery of services to citizens in a digital format through e-government processes, then we would start to create a culture change, you know, throughout society, where we get used to consuming these technologies and services over I don't know what's happening, guys. I'm really sorry. It keeps on dropping the connection.
No. We understand. The weather is changes now and then, and networks are all normally controlled by such. So no, we understand. But I think we got the core of what you were saying in terms of your submissions to that. Rory-san, as you and your company, would you say you're benefiting from the digital economy?
Yes, Peter. I think benefiting would be maybe too strong of a word, but I think there are advantages which we are trying to leverage off. You know, when we look at some of the key technology that we have available that weren't there decades ago, you know, cloud computing, machine learning and artificial intelligence, those are pretty much the backbone of our entire business. And it's because of technologies like that that we are able to be here today and have a team of dedicated expertise and individuals who are trying to make us achieve our company mission and vision. So there are definitely benefits and advantages that we are getting from the digital economy. However, there are also challenges. You know, with everything going digital, I think what was mentioned earlier was how do we then keep the relevant skills that the people that will no longer have those particular skills be relevant in the coming years. You know, as everything digitizes and everything goes digital, a lot more skills are being redundant, and there's a lot more automation, which means a lot more people are being vulnerable. And I think the key thing that we've started to notice is it is very important for us as society not to get completely engulfed by this technology wave. We also need to remember that there are things that we as humans will be able to do much better, and in some cases completely, that robots and machines and whatever digital wave will not be able to do. You know, things like compassion and, you know, the softer skills which allow us to unlock relationships and networks which help businesses grow are some of the key skills which we need to continuously empower into our workforces and the entire economy to make sure that we are always all relevant at any particular point in the future.
Thanks, Rory-san. Dr. Attlee, what is it that we can do as a continent in order to fast track the continent in terms of benefiting within the digital space? What is it that is lagging behind, and what is it that we should do?
That's a very critical question to really pose. But then if you look at fast tracking, there is that danger that I see if we try to have that kind of approach and mindset. Because when you look at the digital economy and the emerging technologies, especially those that have the capacity to adopt those technologies, continue to have the power to monopolize even the industries for that reason. This is where we are even promoting oligopolies in terms of the structures, and which is one of the dangers that we also have to try and make sure that we curb before it gets out of hand, which is why even if you look at even from the regulation perspective, regulation is no longer able to catch up with some of especially the developments is in that whole process of enabling a digital economy. So what we could really start to look at as the African continent, it's retooling and reskilling, but in the ecosystem of our real environment, where we are very much contextual in terms of our approach, instead of just taking that superficial kind of an approach. So that's one of the aspects. So it all dates back, even just going to the basics, especially, and look at what exactly do we have on the ground. Is it working or it's not working? Because let's not try to fix something that is already working and just for the sake of trying to conform to the standards, because then we are just succumbing to peer pressure in terms of saying we are in the digital economy wagon, but at what cost are we really trying to change some of the things that we have been doing, maybe even from a social perspective, from an economic perspective, and at what cost? Because you'd realize, I normally take this example of social media use, where you actually see the ignorance that people have in terms of just being on social media. They don't know what, you can take Facebook, for example. Somebody just posts something on the wallpaper of Facebook, but they don't know the cybersecurity risks of doing that. And we are not even creating that awareness in terms of some of those technologies that we are adopting. So I think one of the first steps that we need to do in terms of really transitioning to that level that we assume we want to reach, we need to create awareness even in terms of the technologies, even just for the basics, how to use those technologies, what do we benefit from those technologies, what to be careful in terms of using some of those technologies. So that's one thing, starting from the basic level, so that at least we have the majority on board, because then we might actually have that danger of having a certain sector of the economy boxed in a certain corner, because at least they are, and we keep on running with that, but we are leaving out the majority behind. So I would say, let's go back to the basics. Education is important before we can try to look at that. Of course, you would also try to look at in terms of the infrastructure and all the other aspects that may be very critical and to play a role in that whole journey. But there is a lot that can be mentioned in as much as we may look at that whole option. But I would say, as Africa, let's look at what we can benefit, because if you look at the digital economy, it's much more of a share, that shared economy. And how do we benefit from that whole aspect? How do we even empower our people in terms of even the GDP? Because one of the dangers that we have in terms of the digital economy, do we have the right measuring metrics to say we are benefiting from the digital economy? Without those right metrics, we are just sometimes blowing the wind, because then there is a lot that we are leaving behind, instead of, because if we are only benefiting a certain section and not benefiting the majority, we still have a long way to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Attlee. I agree with you. Education is the best, especially on issues of the emerging technology. I'm experiencing some challenges at my house currently. My neighbor, I'm not sure if the kids or is the parents, I see some drones flying over my house every now and then, especially on weekends. So I'm starting to think, what is it that they're spying on my house? And I'm trying to reach out to them, but they're not coming around. So I haven't engaged the police services, but soon I'll be doing that, because I'm getting worried now to say that the services are not being used for the right purpose. So thank you. If we have the best education, then we are able to use it according to what is meant for. Thanks, Doc. Dr. Petros, there's a question that has been posed to you. I'm not sure if you were able to read it, but let me read it for you. The question is coming from Mr. Andile. He said to Dr. Petros, is the threat of job losses not still some way off from what we have imagined from the doomsday scenarios we see on television? Many of the jobs that exist today were not in existence 30 years ago. And what we see in that jobs that are lost are jobs that 30 years before they were not inexistent. In many instances, we hear that the jobs of the future are not yet inexistent. Your comment on that, Doc?
I think that's 100% true. I think if I turn that question into a statement, it's a true statement. But I think what I tried to say earlier, yes, for certain industries and certain sectors of activity, there are risks, and we have seen those kind of job losses happening. However, that's what I'm trying to say is, in as much as that happens with new technologies and as production systems, etc., changes, we then need to be really awake to what is emerging. And I think that's where the super fast pace of change, I think at the current circumstances, what catches up to us. I think maybe in the previous century, the pace of certain types of technological change, we know that that pattern is getting faster and faster and faster. And I think the catch up that we as societies, as businesses, as governments have to play, we are way too slow to catch up to that. But that's also what I said earlier. Then we need to step back also sometimes and be carefully at the technology. Yes, it may be new. Yes, it may look very interesting. It's like Albert Einstein. You know, Albert Einstein spent a lot of decades in the latter part of his life reflecting on the impact of his work that led to the splitting of the atom and the creation of the nuclear weapon. So Albert Einstein spent the latter part of his life asking very deep questions about the impact of science and technology on humanity, and where he warns that humanity, we are very quick to adopt new things, but we are very slow to understand the negative consequences on that on our societies. It's like the motor vehicle. Motor vehicle is the most brilliant thing on the planet, but 100 years later, what does our planet look like as a result of that technology? So those are the kind of things we constantly need. And I like the comment, all I'm trying to communicate is let's be very nuanced. Let's understand the new technologies better. And like I said earlier, let's not have this big broad church approach of everything and its uncle in the AI bag. No, if we need to talk robotics, let's talk robotics. If we need to talk financial services and AI, let's talk that. If we need to talk 3D printing, let's do that. If we need to talk nanotechnology, let's do that. You understand what I mean? And then go and explore in that realm, where are the new opportunities, the new jobs, the new companies, and so forth. So I think it's a great discussion to have, but I think let's just be awake as we go forward.
Thanks, Doc. Tebogo, your final remarks on this?
Thank you, Peter. So I think, you know, this whole topic is so loaded. You know, it's so many different aspects that need to be dealt with. For example, if we talk about the issue of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, a lot of the issues, you know, don't necessarily have to do with technology itself. Yes, we know that infrastructure is a problem across Africa, but issues, for example, of tariff and non-tariff-based barriers to trade that have always been there, that have been an issue between trading and member states of AU, those need to be sorted out. Issues of identity management across borders to allow for the free movement of people across borders, issues of roads and logistics infrastructures for the movement of goods between member states. None of those things have anything to do with, you know, with the issue of digital infrastructures or the technology that underlies that. So there are so many things, you know, tax reforms, you know, we've got different, obviously, dispensations on tax and customs fees, on data privacy laws, consumer protection, intellectual protection laws. So we need to harmonize a lot of those enabling facets of the economy as in general before we look at the issue of how we digitalize. That does add an element of complexity to those traditional facets, but it also presents an opportunity for us to possibly leapfrog in terms of having the Africa Continental Free Trade Area realized. So that's probably my parting shot on this, Peter.
Thanks, Tebogo. Much appreciated. Rory-san, your final remarks? Rory-san, you're on mute.
Sorry, Peter. Yes, no, I think a large portion of the key points have been presented by most of my colleagues, but I think the real takeaway is really how to isolate all these big digital technology concepts and really look at them in separate silos. You know, if we're talking AI in this particular field, we're talking AI. If we're talking additive manufacturing, we're talking additive manufacturing. And within those individual ones, we should also then look at the various layers which are then dependent to our current economy and the particular transformation that we want to take, because it could be, and it will most likely be, that all the relevant technologies and digital transformation solutions are not all relevant to us, but some are, and it is important that we completely isolate the ones that are relevant to us to make a better economy and a better tomorrow for everyone.
Thanks, Tibuko. Dr. Attlee, as we conclude, what will be your final say?
I would say let's look at the drivers of value creation in the digital economy. And by that, I'm saying what is the central role of data and the digital intelligence in the digital economy. And we have to look at the complex nature of data, and we have to look at the economic value of data, especially zeroing in on the data value chain, zeroing in on data monetization and ownership of that data. If we do that in the realm of really looking at our African challenges that we need to solve within the context of the digital economy technologies, then we might actually find ourselves within that space where we are able to control everything. So I would say, as I wrap up and say, my last final statement will say, if purpose is not known, abuse is inevitable. Let's really educate ourselves in terms of these technologies and know what we can benefit from them and unlock that value, instead of just doing it for the sake of just conforming to whatever is happening around us. Those would be my final words. Thank you.
Thank you, all my panelists. Thank you to Dr. Tibuko Luate. Thank you to Dr. Petros. Thank you to Dr. Rorisang Posholi. Thank you to Dr. Attlee. I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you. Great discussion.
Great discussion. Thank you, everybody, and thanks, Peter.
Thanks, colleagues.
Thanks. All right, we can switch on the video of Dr. Attlee and Rorisang as
Thank
we
you.
want to start. Thank you, colleagues. I think I will move to the next session, where I will request one of the ZIGF committee member to come and do a close-up. I think, Mr. Andile, are you ready for that? You don't have to pause your video. You can do that without a video. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, of this meeting. And it has been quite interesting, some of the views that were expressed today. I think crucially what we have seen is that there has been a lot of work that has been done, both by civil society, by the educational sector, by governments as well as private entities in advancing the cause around the internet and how it has a pervasive influence in every facet of our daily lives. I think one of the things that we need to be mindful of, as Dr. Petrus and as many other speakers were saying, is that we need to be mindful of the fact that in the year of 2020, there was a higher digital uptake by citizens of South Africa, and that has led to quite a few things happening. There has led to being a greater number of people being involved in the provision of internet services. It has led to a greater number of people being involved in digital technologies as a whole. And we have seen that throughout many of the conversations today, there is work underway to ensure that access is granted to as many people, and it is granted to pretty much anyone who is able to. The means in which we're able to connect as well have increased with a greater number of entry-level mobile phones being internet enabled. However, it is also something that we need to be mindful of. I think in terms of the discussions that we'll be having tomorrow, to look at specifically how do we then protect our rights on the internet? How do we ensure that we don't infringe on other people's rights? And how do we ensure that this greater access is going to be something that is going to be leveraged for the greater good of society as a whole, specifically South African society? So that is something that I look forward to in terms of tomorrow's discussions. I would also like to thank again all of the speakers, as well as the Deputy Minister, for availing themselves. And I hope that in tomorrow's discussions, we'll be able to go a little bit deeper into some of the daily lived experiences of ordinary South Africans in terms of their internet lives. More crucially, tomorrow, I think we're also going to be looking forward to the nomination and election of the IGF committee, as Tato had intimated to earlier on today. And I trust that people will be more willing to put their hands up. I see that we had a decent turnout, and I hope that from all of the people that were present today, you will continue to be present tomorrow, so that you can then shape and influence the discussion around the internet in South Africa. And more importantly, I guess, we need to be able to move the conversation forward in such a way that we are able to achieve the idea of digital interdependence, which is a coming together of different digital technologies in such a way that we enhance the quality of life that ordinary South Africans live. That is, I think, today, and I hope that pretty much everyone who was a part of today's discussions is able to then come up with means with which we can then take these discussions further. I would hate to think of an IGF as being just a glorified talk shop. I would like us to be able to take action about some of the things that are pressing in our little silos, so that we are able to then come together and collectively work on how to figure out a collective way forward that is going to drive the discussion around the internet, especially in South Africa, and the discussion around digital technologies and disruptive technologies further, and ensure that it is something that is democratized and is a positive for the greater community of South Africa. Chair, I will hand it back to you as you bring us a wrap for today.
Thanks, Andile. Thanks and much appreciated, colleagues. We appreciate your attendance. We want to believe that you benefited out of today's session. What we're trying to do is we want all partners to be part of this. You will see from today that we have people that are coming from the academia, we have people that are coming from the private sector, from the civil society, from government, and of course from the business side, because we want the multi-stake approach to be fruitful, and we want people to be free to discuss on issues that concerns internet governance. Colleagues, as we're going to be closing out now today, tomorrow it's still packed. We got a number of sessions where we will have discussing the digital literacy program and designed to empower young people and educate them. The second one will be the one that talks about disinformation in the lead up to 2021 local government elections. We will also talk about the one that talks about promoting cybersecurity during COVID-19 pandemic. We will also need to be talking about the one that talks about the IP and copyright, which is it's important. And the last session will be the one that talks about privacy and protection of personal information. You will understand that we definitely need this, especially that our kids as well, it can be from creche, from primary school, from high school, even tertiary, they have access to these devices. So we don't know what is it that they're doing on our absence. So the education part of it will be much of importance right there. So colleagues, please allow me to conclude the meeting and adjourn, and we shall see each other tomorrow at 9 o'clock. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Chair.
Thank you, everyone.